I'd like to call the regular city commission meeting of February 18th, 2025 to order and ask all of you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call. Mayor Pro Tem Olsman.
Present.
Commissioner Rozelle.
Present.
Commissioner Elder.
Present.
Commissioner Steinhardt.
Present.
Mayor Paul present. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have one communication. Do we have a motion to accept the resignation of Susie Potter from the Parks and Recreation Board with thanks for time served?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Seconded.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. County Commissioner elected official remarks. Have any elected officials in the room? Okay, and seeing none, we'll move on to public participation. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on an item that is not on the agenda. You'll have that opportunity when that item comes up. So if there is anything you'd like to comment on, please come forward to the podium and introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sid Carden. I'm a resident of Huntington Woods for a long time, 13307 Vernon Street. And I want to talk about the last few city meetings. At the last few city meetings, citizens have suggested that the city restricts the use of facilities by political groups. The specific group that the speakers find offensive is the Huntington Woods Peace Group, who have advocated for a ceasefire in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So that's what I'd like to address tonight. In the context of the war, political and religious expressions have merged. I don't think a meaningful separation can be made between the two. Recent events of a political/religious nature that have occurred in the city are not just one-sided, that side being those who support a ceasefire or a two-state solution. We have had other events as well. The library had a presentation entitled Saving Abigail. The topic was the horrendous attack on Israel by Hamas and the lives of the survivors in the aftermath of the attack. This is an instance of political expression. Yet none of the speakers in favor of restricting political expression mentioned that. One speaker referred to keffiyeh-clad people at an event at a city park. Yet no speaker criticized the city for displaying a menorah in Scotia Park and allowing a Hanukkah parade. Many of the parade participants wore yarmulkes. Political expression doesn't have to be exclusive to the Middle East. A few weeks ago, the library had a speaker to talk about Black Bottom, a neighborhood in Detroit where black people were systemically and violently discriminated against by white people. Some people may feel that this too is political. Should the city restrict that kind of political expression as well? Israelis and Palestinians, Muslims and Jews, blacks and whites, and the expression of their identity is democracy. Restriction of that expression is authoritarianism, and that's what we move towards as we censor so-called offensive speech. Ultimately, there becomes room for only one point of view, that of the tyrannical majority. One more point that I want to make before ending. A presentation a few weeks ago or a few months ago in the library by a speaker who traveled through Palestine did not incite the criminal assault on Jordan Acker and his family. As the city has already noted, other University of Michigan regions have suffered similar attacks. I urge the city to continue the present policy of allowing for the expression of diverse views. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
This is a comment period, so you're more than welcome to make a comment.
Okay, well, I'm not sure if this has to do with the moratorium you're going to discuss later.
That's on the.
That's on the
That's on
agenda,
the
so
agenda.
if it relates to that,
Then I should wait.
yes.
Okay. Wait. What did he say? Well, you can speak on more.
Yeah, I wanted to set the stage.
Oh, good. Very good.
Hi, Ellie Bosco, 8376 Huntington Road. I'm here today to talk about our parks and a rumor that's been circulating regarding the possibility of shutting down Val Jones Park, possibility of removing or moving the tennis courts that are currently by the rec center. And I wanted to say that I understand that no decisions have been made at this point, and I'm looking forward to that conversation that's going to take place, be open and advertised to the community. I will say that as a mom of 3 young children, it's really hard to come to these meetings. And so unfortunately, a lot of family members aren't able to make many of these meetings and don't know what's going on until it's too late. So I do wanted to say something before it's too late and we start making changes right away. I wanted to say, for one, I really like where our current tennis courts are by the rec center. It's really convenient for people to be able to use those courts. A lot of people do. They enjoy them. They're right at the rec center. They're right at the pool. And we also, I believe, just spent a lot of money resurfacing them within the past couple of years. So the idea of tearing that down seems to be a waste of money, in my opinion. If there's a need for a pavilion, we have pavilions at Burton Park. We have pavilions at Mary Kay Davis Park, and I know that we're going to be doing renovations to Reynolds Park, and that would be a great place to have something like that as well for rental. With regards to Val Jones Park, I have young kids who are aging in place and would like to have opportunities for things to do that aren't just for little kids. My kids are really looking forward to using the skate park. A lot of their friends use the skate park. Their friends' families, parents, younger siblings, people use that park. I understand that work needs to be done to it, and I understand that money has been invested to do work in that park. So I would like to see us make those investments to that park. I've also been told that where the ice rink or the roller rink is, it's problematic, physically, structurally, whatnot. That doesn't necessarily mean that we shut down that park. It is one of the few outdoor areas that is accessible and diverse for a large, diverse population of our community, not just little kids, not just older people, but also our teenagers. Our teenagers don't have a lot of places to go. Another idea that somebody threw out was the idea of having beach volleyball as well for our teenagers. So instead of getting rid of areas that help diversify our community, let's enhance them and add to them. So before we make any decisions, please consider engaging the rest of the community, especially those of us who have young children and children aging in place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rika Buckaluka, 8544 Huntington Road. I am here because I understand that there's been some concern about having community groups meet in the library and in the community center. And I'd just like to say that I think that that's an important thing for Huntington Woods to do, is to support community groups at this time. I understand the concern if a group is suggesting violence against anyone else, but the particular group that I'm aware of is a group about that's promoting peace, and that should not intimidate anyone. And I think it is important that the city encourage groups, especially at this time, to have a place to meet and to discuss peaceful resolutions and things that benefit the community. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jessica Downey, 13160 Kingston. As I'm sure you are well aware, a post was made on the Huntington Woods Parents Facebook page on February 9th regarding plans for our city parks that reignited the ongoing discussion about Val Jones Park. Unfortunately, this post lacked context and history and sparked rumors and questions amongst our neighbors. As someone who has stood at this podium many, many times over the last few years and who has been very vocal about the need for open communication and transparency, I just wanted to take a moment to commend the city for the statement put out on February 10th regarding city park infrastructure. I appreciate the prompt communication and effort to quell the misinformation and concerns. I have been actively involved in city matters and have fought for the improvement of Val Jones Park for over 10 years. I trust that the city will continue its plan to improve dangerous and dilapidated infrastructure and redesign park spaces based on the majority of resident feedback from multiple surveys and meetings over the last 3 to 5 years for the benefit of our community. In addition, I'd just like to remind the community at large that the best way to be involved in these discussions is to attend committee meetings and to contact the city or the Parks and Rec Department when seeking clarification on a particular issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jeff Spakowski, 10155 LaSalle, resident of Huntington Woods since 2010. Commissioners and neighbors. As myriad points of view are given this evening, I encourage respectful listening and invite all of us to reflect on what reaction you would have if a governor, a president, this or another country, took actions to make themselves the arbiter of who may speak, what they may speak, and where they may speak it, and what their reaction would be. I leave it to others to talk about the legal aspects of what the Commission is contemplating. What I will say is that there are a great number of divisions in our country today, in our world. Some relatively recent, some going back centuries. They have to do with race, ethnicity, and women's rights, among many others. No matter what passion you follow when it comes to seeking justice, the advocacy work you do, the activism you take part in, the only way progress is made is by talking. Talking in our homes for sure, but also in our public spaces, some of which are the spaces this city owns. None of us can do it all. None of us can do it all, nor alone. Coming together to talk, to find common ground is part of what happens in the rooms that we reserve here in the city. Do I always agree with everyone and what they want? Of course not. Does everyone agree with me? Of course not. What I do expect to be able to do, though, is have conversations, take in information and opinion, and meet with different people to hear what they have to say, without an elected or otherwise formal body deciding what I choose to engage with. Earlier this year, I attended the city-sponsored anti-racist parenting training. At times, I felt pretty terrible about the gap between what I thought I knew and what I now know. But I found it valuable to look at my blind spots, how some words I use don't always have the intended effect. I am grateful that the Anti-Racism Advisory Committee did the work to bring it into our city. I bring it up to remind the Commission and my neighbors that progress is uncomfortable. Perhaps a similar kind of discomfort to when our library held a city-sponsored event a few years ago that drew national attention. At that time, the city upheld its diversity, equity, and inclusion values. Let's see what happens now.
Thank you.
Rebecca Nagaski, 13307 Vernon. I am proud to be a Huntington Woods resident, and I am proud of my lawn sign which states that all are welcome in Huntington Woods. To me, this means allowing for the expression of residents without censure. I believe that the expression of customs and cultures and the study of historical events should be fostered in this community. This will promote a deeper understanding and acceptance of different viewpoints and beliefs. I hope that we continue to have open rentals and open at the library, the community center, Parks and Rec for all kinds of events. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, seeing none, public participation is closed, and we'll move on to the regular items of business. Item number 1 is the voter turnout challenge presentation.
Good evening, I'm Nat Pernick, 13313 Ludlow, and Huntington Woods resident since '92. Since 2018, I've sponsored a voter turnout competition in federal elections between Huntington Woods and 7 neighboring communities. And once again, Huntington Woods won the competition with an 85.55% turnout. And so I am pleased to present a check for $1,000 to the city of Huntington Woods, and I'm not 100% sure what it's going to be used for, but I know somebody knows. I'd like to post this in next door. If you have a better idea, you can let me know. And if possible, maybe get a picture with maybe the mayor, just so that we can...
Sure, we can definitely do that. Did we talk about what to do with this year's?
My suggestion was to use it for one of the summer events that's open to all the community, one of our summer concerts,
Okay,
to offset our cost for the music in the park that we do every summer.
okay.
One of those events.
Sounds good. All right, thank you.
Can you hold it? No, you're never right.
Okay. Thanks very much.
That's a trophy Huntington Woods doesn't plan on giving up anytime soon, so thank you for doing what you do, appreciate that.
Yes, we like it when someone comes in and gives us a check. You know?
Okay, item number 2 is a matter of consideration to approve a temporary moratorium on room rentals and reservation applications by recognized community groups. You want to
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
start us off?
I say Mr. President, sorry, Mr. Mayor. So, at the last commission meeting, there was discussion about having the city work in conjunction with myself and the city attorney, work on the policies for the room rentals and reservation policy at both the rec center and the library. There have been some questions come up regarding what was available, so we did take a look at the policy relative to room. We had a separate policy for parks that had been revised about 2 years ago. So we kind of looked at the policies relative to the recreation center and separate policy in regards to what was approved at the library for those rentals. We did have an application that came in since the last meeting where when we reviewed the application, I thought that was my estimation, by the rules, the current rules that we have that prohibited the rentals of the room by a private resident for a group an event that was open to the public. And that's what, by the application that was submitted, it was submitted by a private resident for a recognized community group, but it was for an event that was open to the public, which was different than events that we had in the past. And I kind of outlined those differences in the memo that I provided to you. So I reviewed that. The application was applied for both at the Parks and Rec building and at the library. It was my city manager's recommendation to deny that permit. And we have been working on the review and the revision of the parks policy in conjunction with talking with City Attorney Zaleski. It was a recommendation while we're doing that to ask for a moratorium only on community group rentals that would apply to all community groups, to allow us to come up with one policy that will apply to everybody, that will allow for, I think, the best use. And I will allow the city to make sure everybody can use the spaces safely and as they were designed. So we're asking that of the city commission at this evening. We're asking for a no longer than 90-day moratorium. We would still allow for private rentals for individuals who wanted to have birthday parties or private family functions there. This would only apply to community groups and for the period of 90 days until the policy was revised. Any applications that have been approved to date would still be in effect. We would just not approve any, if the moratorium was approved, we would not approve any more going forward until we had a new policy or the moratorium was revised by was released by the city commission. I'll defer to Mr. Zaleski, any comments he may have relative to that.
Right, yeah, this is a very narrowly tailored moratorium that's focused on the concerns that have raised about the fact that we have some groups, some that are coming in by invitation-only events, others that are coming in advertising to the public. And, you know, the policy as it presently stands for the community center is no events that are open to the public. And when they are, even when they're by invitation, it's very difficult to manage the flow. The community center is a bustling building with a lot of things going on. And so there's a desire to take a pause, take a look at the policies, try to even them out across the various facilities, see what's right in what facility, when, where, and how. This is not a content-based limitation or proposal. It is purely what we would call a time, place, manner proposal. So individuals that are having their invitation-only events, whatever they may be, still are able to do that. Whereas these larger events that raise bigger concerns about managing crowds and how many people are going to be there is what the moratorium would be controlling. 90 days is a relatively short moratorium as moratoriums go. There also, in your proposed resolution, would be a provision for a waiver to make sure that there are no concerns if there was a demonstrated need by some speaker, applicant, group, et cetera, to accommodate public accommodations needs, ADA, et cetera, or if there were no other alternative channels for the person to speak and convey their message. So that is a safety valve in there to make sure that nothing is getting wrapped into this that would bring this into a content-based or a full-on First Amendment suppression type of situation.
So before we get a motion, I got a couple questions. The exception right now is currently a petition that goes to the city manager and then is forwarded to the city commission for a hearing.
Yes.
Is it possible to change that to the city manager making that decision? Because we only, as a body, meet once a month, and that could be a long period of time for a group just waiting for an answer.
I think in order to be consistent with other types of moratoria that have been enacted with waivers and to ensure a full amount of due process, having the hearing in front of the commission in a public forum is the best option.
Okay. And since we started talking about this about a month ago, and I know you have been doing some work on it, can we change that moratorium to 60 days? I mean, it is our intent not to drag our feet on this. So.
I think that's very reasonable, and we would hustle to get the job done.
Mr. Mayor, if you're done. I had a question, and that is, would it make more sense to have this as an ordinance rather than a policy? So that way it carries force of law if there's violations of, an ordinance. My concern is what we've had in the past is a bunch of haphazard policies, verbal policies by department heads that weren't in writing. Some allowed this, some allowed that. I think what we're trying to do now is bring everything on an even playing field, that facility rentals are treated like this, park rentals are treated like that. It's in writing. It's something that the public can see. And I'm just wondering, would it make more sense to have it as an ordinance as opposed to simply a policy?
So you're saying the ultimate policy we come up with, not the moratorium?
Not the moratorium, but the ultimate policy.
I mean, it could be done that way. You know, some communities regulate their parks through ordinance, but it typically is done through policy. And our goal here is a comprehensive use policy that's going to cover the parks, room by room in the buildings, all in one place, adopted by one resolution, and they can be posted on the city website. I think to get it to a position where it's an ordinance and a potential ordinance violation, and that raises potential other concerns. Because, okay, if somebody is coming in to rent a room to speak, and they end up violating the ordinance, well, now, are we really going to enforce a misdemeanor or a civil infraction? That's raising a number of other types of concerns. So I think they typically are policies, and that would be my recommendation, to stick with the policy.
But like, my comment is like the policy, the proposed policy prohibits like alcohol, right? But that's just in a written policy, how does that carry the force of law as opposed to like being an ordinance?
For something like that, if you're, that type of use of the premises that you want to prohibit, then that might be more appropriate for an ordinance, of course. But when it comes to just the administrative policies of how you apply for a room, how you pay for it, that's cumbersome to put into an ordinance, and it doesn't really need to be elevated to the level of an ordinance. So I think as we continue the review, if there are certain types of activities, outside of routine use of the facility that you'd like to bake into an ordinance, that's something we could explore.
Much easier to change a policy than an ordinance too. Policy is flexible, and best left to the people that are managing the particular space or event and so forth. But I personally do not favor any type of ordinance for this. I mean, I think we have a structure here, and the structure is to let the city manager, in this case, the rec center and library, let them deal with policies and not try to, I just think it's too much overreach to consider it for an ordinance. I don't like that at all.
Are we doing questions now, or do you
Right.
need a motion?
We're gonna move to a motion sooner than
Because I
later.
have questions. I'll pause.
Okay, you wanna make a motion?
I'll make a motion for the purposes of discussion, because I have many questions.
I'll
Okay.
second that.
Is that motion, what's presented here with a change to 60 days? Or are you leaving it at 90, just so I'm clear?
I will motion to have a discussion
We
on
No,
what's.
We need a motion specifying
Gotta
whether
jump
we're
in the
adopting
pool.
All right,
a
fine.
resolution
Gotta
as
jump in the pool.
presented or with modifications.
For the proposal with the change of 60 days.
I'll second that.
Can I ask my question?
You can.
Okay, Mr. Mayor. Can you or the city mayor walk me through what happens if there is no moratorium? And we just work on the policy and, come up with it in 60 days? What happens at, like, the vaults, what happens on the ground at the Parks and Rec office, at the library, at Public Safety? Like, walk me through why we need this and how it impacts the civil service that staffs our community.
If you don't pass the moratorium, then the default position is the policy that I've given you in the packet. We would just review all applications that come in by the policy that currently exists. So if a community group reservation came in and met the policy, it would just be approved.
Right. Mr. Mayor, I just said, so nothing would change until the policy changed. It would be the status quo.
Right, so my point is, in those 60 days, we've lived with the current policy for the last many decades, right?
At least 3
So how
years, that's
much-
what I got.
what is the purpose beyond let's take a pause and, which I think I support. I've had many issues with these policies not being consistent from building to building, with kind of this gray area of how do you recognize a community group, right? I think we all want a better, more consistent, transparent, non-content-based use of city property policy that's holistic. I think the goals are shared. But my question is, why is this moratorium needed? Help me understand how that impacts the city. Because we've lived with this policy for so long now. What's another 60 days?
That's ultimately the commission's prerogative to decide that if it wants to live with the policy a while longer. I think, as Manager Wilson mentioned, there was an application, and I think sometimes it takes one application that raises a concern about your policy or an ambiguity in your policy to realize that, we need to fix that and in some way. And the idea of the moratorium is to pause to just as a preemptive way of preventing more of those situations occurring in the meantime, so that we can study the issue, we can clear up the policy and move forward. How likely is another one like that to come up? Anybody's guess. But that's why this is presented tonight as an option if the commission so chooses to go in that direction.
I have a question. In other cities that you represent or other areas where there has been some discussion of things like this, have they opted for a moratorium approach, or have they just changed things in process?
For this type of policy, not so much the moratorium approach. I mean, it's much more common in land use type situations and other types of policies, but.
Actually, Commissioner Elder did, I agree with her analysis and the question that she asked, but, so tell us what's the benefit to the 60 days? Let's say we just say, okay, 60 days, cool it off, take a look at it. Tell us what the benefit is.
The benefit, as I mentioned, it really is just preempting any, additional applications that fall in the vague area. Having one that had fallen in there and was denied, it's entirely possible there could be others. And
I think there's a bit of a tacit admission by the discussion we've already had at this table, that this policy is a bit obsolete. We're working under a policy that we don't like the terms of it. It's not meeting our needs that we have coming in for applications. And I think there are some issues with it. I think there's some things that need to be revised legally, and I think we need to come up with a better policy that applies to everybody, that is non-content based, that'll stand up to legal scrutiny. So I think you could have, if you don't enact a moratorium and a temporary moratorium to put the regulations that you want in place, you can either end up with an event that you would not have allowed to take place 60 days later, or you're going to deny an event that you would have otherwise allowed to occur because you didn't have the regulations in place that you've already had some admission that you want to revise. Do you have to approve the moratorium? No, that was a recommendation by the administration. You could forego that and just go back to working on the policy.
Mr. Mayor, I think too, this boiled down to, shortly after I was elected, there was a group that wanted to use the building. It was like the Villages or the Village or something. It was a outside group, and they came in for official, status, recognized status, so they could rent a facility. I mean, that was 2015, and it's not happened since. So I don't even know how do these groups? It's not even clear to me how they even get recognized status. Like, this group had to come in and ask the city commission for some type of vote on the record to make them a recognized group, but there isn't even an application process. So I think we need to really formalize how we do this, so we're treating everybody the same, whether you're a resident, a recognized group, a non-recognized group, a political group, whatever. I think the whole thing is, it's a level playing field.
There is an application for recognized groups and a process that
Right.
they go through.
We've had one since 2015.
Mr. Mayor, can I just pose a quick, one short question? So, would a moratorium, with obviously an eye towards potential judicial intervention or potential judicial, a judge being asked to pass, judgment on what the city is doing or not doing, does the moratorium process, in your opinion, lend itself to a better result ultimately? Because the question would be, if you just change something like that. Now, my understanding, and you can correct me if you're being more refreshed on constitutional issues than me probably, that whenever you're talking about content or what people are going to talk about versus how they're going to talk about it, or just getting the space or renting the room, just strictly process versus content, that content is subject to a much stricter standard of judicial review than process would be. In other words, asking somebody, well, what are you here to talk about? That you're just inviting all kinds of issues. And we've had that discussion in this room multiple times about multiple issues over the years. And I want nothing to do with that point, but the question is process with respect to physically, how are you going to do it? Does the moratorium, in your opinion as city attorney, help come up with a better product, if you will, in terms of that?
Long-term, for the ultimate policy, the moratorium, I would not say matters one way or the other. The key about the moratorium is, essentially avoiding a situation where the administration is in the position of operating in the gray area and generating a decision, which is like the one we're talking about today, that may be interpreted as, different ways by different people.
Is the moratorium
understandably so.
itself objectionable? Kind of from a
As this is structured, this is clearly designed for non-content-based regulation, effectively on the size and the manner of advertising the event. That's really it. You could have the same event as a private invite event, and that the only difference is the size and the scope of the audience.
Ask a question, Mr. Mayor?
So I was on the other side of the table just a few years ago, advocating for revisions to the parks rental policy when we didn't put a moratorium in place while that process was happening. So clearly we don't necessarily have a standard for that. Question that I have is, as we look to change the policy, if somebody has already booked the space, gotten a permit under the current policy, if there is no moratorium and then we change the policy, are we obligated to grandfather in the people who are holding an event that will now violate the new policy?
Yes. Once a permit has been processed and granted, you don't want to change that. And that's why this moratorium would not affect any currently granted events. And the same would be true when the new policy takes effect. That would be prospective.
And my other question for the city manager is that some of the concerns that led to this recommendation for the moratorium and the revision to the policy was around the ability to, or the sort of the capacity and perhaps safety from maybe a fire safety perspective for the volume, the number of people that come and attend an event that is public without having pre-registration or really knowing how many people were anticipated to attend that event. If the policy remains in place until it is revised and there is a permit request for an event, whether it's requested by a private individual or a private resident or a city group, and city administration believes that the room will go over capacity and then cause perhaps some safety concerns, or what, do you have does the flexibility exist for you to turn down a permit that you think is going to cause a safety issue or a capacity issue in the room that is being requested? If that made sense?
No, I know exactly what you're saying. To me, the current policy doesn't really address that. I think we always have the right to protect the public safety if need be. We have capacity limitations in those rooms. I can only really enforce, without knowing how many people are being invited to an event, if I didn't, especially if it was a fully private event, I can only really enforce that after the fact. If we end up with, 400 people in a room with a capacity of 100, we'd be forced to come in and really frankly don't, evacuate the room or evacuate people out until we got it down to a safe level. To preemptively review that, that doesn't exist in the policy right now.
But if during the course of the event, there was an issue related to going over capacity, fire code or whatever, I would imagine be able to bring in public safety if necessary to
We would
clear out
always
the
be able to
space.
bring in public safety to reduce the crowd until it was at a safe level per the stated fire code regulations.
But you don't think that you'd be able to deny the permit because you anticipate having more people than the facility could accommodate?
Under the way the policy is currently written, to preemptively deny, no, I could not do that.
Ready for public comment? Any other comments here? Okay, I'm going to open this up to public comments at this time. Please come forward. And excuse me for just a moment. Before you start, for the record, I want to state that there were 2 email comments that were sent in, asked to be part of the record for tonight's commission meeting, one from Marie Defer and one from Benjamin King, representing McKnight, Kanzo, Smith, Radke, and Brault. So I just want to mention those letters are received and filed and part of the record. Sorry.
Hi, oh, it's okay. I'm Jackie Friedman. I'm not gonna give my address, if that's okay. I'm happy to do that privately. I've attended a few of these events, and I guess I have some thoughts on the moratorium from my perspective after attending these events. I think things are escalating, and these events are getting crowded, and the space in the library is not that big. These events are being publicized on Facebook, on other websites. There's many people coming in from other communities. I was at 2 of these events where I, as a Huntington Woods citizen, did not feel safe. One of the events is the same day, or actually it crossed the midnight, so it was when Jordan Acker's house down the street from where I live was attacked. I can tell you that there were hostilities, and if I do attend these events that I know are public, we will likely need police resources. There is likely going to be a fire code issue. I have lived here for many years. I rented the rec center for a couple of my son's birthdays. I think that's a totally appropriate use of city space. I don't have a problem with my tax dollars being used to have birthday parties, to have private family functions. When it becomes a public political debate on money I'm paying taxes for, and then knowing that the city's gonna need to use resources from those tax dollars to keep everybody safe, I think that's where we're running into issues. I don't also understand why I, as a city resident, need to pay to utilize this space, but groups can come in and reserve the space and not have to pay anything, and nor it's like free space for them. I don't really understand that. I guess I should have started this, that we really appreciate the city commissioners considering all this, because it has been very tense and it has been scary for some of other residents here, and that's the reality, and I'm saying that in front of everybody. I have added security to my home. These are trying times, and I think that needs to be considered. And the proper use of these facilities really does need to be taken into consideration. We are a small community. We have limited resources. We don't have the resources and the capacity to deal with continual disruption of our city property. And I think that's all I have to say. And again, thank you. Thank you for considering this and for putting a moratorium. I think it's completely appropriate.
Thank you.
Watch it.
If
Watch what
this
you
gentleman
say.
just called me stupid.
This is why we're here.
And I'm
Excuse
stupid,
me,
thank you.
please. This is not for addressing the crowd here. Please address your comments to the city commission when you're recognized.
Thank you. My name is Linda Ashley. I'm the chairman of the Huntington Woods Peace Group. I currently live in Ferndale, but I lived in Huntington Woods for 33 years, first at 25870 Pembroke and then at 26680 York. I raised all my children here in Huntington Woods through the Berkeley school system, and I was one of the earliest members of the Huntington Woods Peace Group. The Huntington Woods Peace Group has been an ongoing institution in the city of Huntington Woods for 22 years. We were founded in 2003 in reaction to the Iraq War, and from then on, our mission has been to promote peace and justice, both at home and abroad. We are active citizens and we work in our own community, living out our belief that citizenship is as much about talking together locally as it is about federal and state elections. We have held a meeting once a month for all of those 22 years, mostly at the Huntington Woods Public Library. The meetings have covered a variety of topics with differing opinions explored. Many have been controversial subjects with opposing viewpoints. After COVID, the library began to close earlier, so only recently we held a few meetings at the Recreation Center with the purpose of saving some money and being able to start later and allow people to have their dinner before they come. We have never had any disruptions whatsoever at any of the more than 250 meetings that we have held. We scheduled a meeting at the Recreation Center for Wednesday, February 19th, which was booked and then was canceled. So we went to the library, which booked the meeting and then canceled it. We were told this was done because of the content of the meeting. The content of the meeting is to discuss the current political climate, which we consider repressive, and what we can do to combat it. We were told that the meeting is apt to attract too many people as well as demonstrations against it. We have never had too many people at our meetings, I'm sorry to say, and we have never had disruptions at our meetings. And in 2016, when President Trump first came to his office, and presented what we considered repressive ideas that threaten peace and justice, we held exactly the same meeting without incident. It is up to the City Commission to tell us how they would come to the conclusion that this meeting would attract an overwhelming amount of people or demonstrations of any kind. In addition, the American Library Association says a public library that opens its facilities for public use may not exclude a group from its facilities to avoid controversy or public disapproval. To our families and neighbors, we say, peace and justice are not abstract concepts to read about in the newspaper, but tangible goals we can and must pursue in our daily lives without fear of intimidation or censorship. We have always assumed that the city of Huntington Woods is the type of community that also expresses those beliefs. Thank you for your consideration and for the time that you've put into this.
Thank you.
And I'd be glad to sign this.
Hello, my name is Phyllis Aronson, and I live at 10524 Elgin for the last 46 years. I don't know how many people here know the full name of what we call the Huntington Woods Peace Group. The full name of our group is actually the Huntington Woods Peace, Citizenship, and Education Project, HWPCE for short. Each Each letter in our rather long name has a meaning and a purpose, which I would like to share with you. HW, the name of our city, felt like a logical place to start. We started as a group of friends and neighbors living in Huntington Woods. We felt grounded in our small city, more like a village than a city, and chose to identify ourselves as residents. The word peace in our name, we came into being as a response to what was later identified as a dishonorable war in Iraq. World peace is still our most pressing concern. The part that says Huntington Woods Peace, Citizenship, and Education. We saw ourselves as needing study and education in order to be active citizens. We read about and studied the main issues of the day that we faced as citizens. We sought out scholars and experts to speak to us on these issues of common concern, such as ongoing wars, the climate crisis, and gun violence in the schools, making these sessions the bulk of our monthly meetings open to the public. In other words, while educating ourselves, we also offered important information to the community. We saw our work as an ongoing project of understanding the world we live in, so we called ourselves a project. Huntington Woods Peace, Citizenship, and Education Project. In the spring of 2002, we applied for the privilege of participating in the Huntington Woods Parade. To do that, Gary Zarolnik, a member of our group, and myself, then the chairperson, met with the city manager and the chief of police. The police chief set the agenda on a discussion of the requirements for groups participating in the parade. There was to be no commercial advertising by participants. And in the case for the peace group, he said, we would have to understand that we could not take a political stand for one political party over another. We had no difficulty in identifying with these concerns. We were then accepted as a community group eligible to participate in the parade. For the last 22 years, we have held to the perspective of the city that we made on that day with the city manager and the police chief. We made a commitment to the city regarding neutrality, and we have held to it. We do not espouse a point of view, either at our meetings or in our participation in the July 4th parade. In the parade of 2024, we allowed 2 signs only. One of them was Cease Fire Now, and the other one was Bring Them Home. Even as we strove for balance in our signage, at a small pocket of people felt emboldened to yell and scream at us as we went past. I asked, why weren't they satisfied? Why did they choose to vilify us and strive to get rid of us, so to speak? In the same parade, we were, nevertheless, as usual, welcomed and applauded by the overwhelming majority of spectators. This was heartening to see. The vast majority of Huntington Woods residents are still tolerant and fair-minded citizens and welcome our presence. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
I lost myself.
Hello, thank you for it seems like we're trying to connect the dots and your dots are different than our dots. That's what I come up with listening to you chat, discuss it. I think you will remember the event 5 years ago when there was a drag queen bingo controversy at the library. And I remember you being there, Mr. Paul. And at least 100 people showed up in the gym at the rec center to state their opinion as to whether or not there should be a drag queen event at the library. One person's statement stood out to me. That person was Jordan Acker. He told the commission, he said, I was living in Chicago, and I wondered if Jordan Acker was even here tonight, I'm not sure, but he said, I'm dating a girl in Chicago, and I told her if we are going to go any farther in this relationship, I just want you to know that I am going to be spending the rest of my life in the city of Huntington Woods. This is where I want to raise my family. She never heard of Huntington Woods, but soon enough, they did get married, and of course, as you know, they live in Huntington Woods. He said it was the ideals of the city of Huntington Woods. This is where he wanted to raise his family. I remember being very moved by it. My son was with me, and we both just were kind of choked up. Unfortunately, he was the victim of vandalism and abuse as a result of his position at U of M and his stand on the Gaza war, which I'm not going to go into. Was it done by neighbors, by residents of Huntington Woods? I doubt it. Was the incident of the gentleman who spoke at your December meeting, who's here tonight, he had an incident, was that done by neighbors or residents of Huntington Woods? I doubt it. It was more likely done by outsiders, which are the same type of people that came to protest the drag queen event more than 5 years ago. But here we are today, and after 20-some years of promoting peace, social and economic justice, committed to any acts of violence on anyone and endless wars, we are trying to figure out why the city has changed their policy. We never have a maximum amount. We finally had one. Yay, we had Mallory McMurrow come to the library, and then we saw that the occupancy, I believe, was 65, and we went, uh-oh, there people were standing. First time, we always complain we don't have enough people. Occupancy, safety, as you brought up, never has been an issue. We've had over 200 meetings in 20 years. We've never had one incident of any sort, inside or outside. 200 meetings. So, for the city of Huntington Woods to change their policy based on these acts of violence, which are scary in our community, I think that if Jordan Acker were sitting here tonight, he would agree that we have been and should continue to be a bastion of peace, social justice, and pride. I might add, in a community that claims to be inclusive, and now with our anti-racism signs that came out, which I have one on my lawn, it says, we welcome you and we respect you. Yes, there will always be people out there that will be harmful, but certainly the peace group is not one to promote that. So for you to shut the doors on our meetings, and also for the South Oakland County Dems, is abhorrent. That's not what Jordan Acker, I don't believe, wants in this community. Let's move forward, not backward, because that's what I believe, and many of us think that your decision is doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joanne Durst. K-R-I-S-T-A-L.
You spoke, yeah.
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Don Greenspan. I reside at 26627 Meadowcrest in Huntington Woods. I've been a resident here for 24 years. I've been a member of the State Bar of Michigan in good standing for almost 50 years. That makes me a little old. But I've been a member of the ACL, American Civil Liberties Union, and I have been on the Oakland County Lawyers Committee. I've been a member of the Huntington Woods Peace Group for 23 years that people have talked about. And I've been an organizer for the Huntington Woods Committee for Ceasefire. I'm here to speak on the preemptive shutdown of our meeting that it was supposed to take place tomorrow. It was done without notice, without reason, contrary to history, as people have talked about. There's no reason for any moratorium. There's no reason to change your policy. As people said, we were formed to protest the Iraq War. We were unpopular at the beginning. We demonstrated in the Huntington Woods Parade. It's to the city's credit, they allowed us to do that. At the beginning, we were criticized. After a while, we gained a lot of popularity. Then what happened? The war on Gaza happened. We took part in events like that. We became unpopular. But the First Amendment shouldn't depend on the popularity or the divisiveness or the perception of that. It has nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with it, but unfortunately I think that's what was happening. Now, I was one of the organizers. Our two groups, the Huntington Woods Peace Group and the Ceasefire Group, organized that event, kite event. It happened in September 29th. And there was a lot of criticism from city residents. And the city, you did the right thing. You came up with an official statement, and I'd like to read it. And it said, the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution guarantees freedoms concerning religion, expression, assembly, and the right of petition. The First Amendment does not permit the city to regulate speech based on religion or ethnicity, or to limit an individual's freedom of expression based on the message being conveyed. Burton Park is public property that can be used by members of the public and groups with or without a permit. So you did the right thing. You allowed the event to go forward. And let me say, there was no public safety problem. There was discussion. It was the event that should be promoted in the city of Huntington Woods. People from opposing points of view getting together and discussing their differences. There was a lot of difference of opinion, but it was what the city of Huntington Woods should promote. And that's what you did. And that's what you did, and that's what you should do going forward. The purpose of the First Amendment is to guarantee free speech regardless of popularity, divisiveness, or objections of other people. And as I said, the history of the peace group, sometimes we were popular, sometimes we convinced we were unpopular, then we were popular, and maybe as a result of what we've done lately, we're unpopular. But the First Amendment is designed to express points of view, to change people's points of view. Now, let me say what was stated before. The reason for canceling our meeting that was supposed to take place tomorrow is a complete pretext. We have a history of 200 meetings. We've never had any public safety concerns. We've never had any over parking concerns. We've never had any concerns of the building being overpopulated. So those reasons are entirely a pretext. And that's what the law provides. If you give a reason for shutting down meetings and it's totally bogus and totally a pretext, then I would submit, and I think the city attorney is completely wrong, that the cancellation of this meeting was entirely based on content, was entirely based on the fact that we've taken a position on two contentious issues, the election of Donald Trump and the war on Gaza. And I think the city is engaged in total hypocrisy here. You've had an event on June 10th. I attended that event. You've had a resolution. I appeared here. I don't come to many of these. You had a resolution on LGBTQ rights. You have an anti-racism committee. You had, as Sid Carden talked about, on January 25th, you had an author talking about her new book about the release of the hostages. Now, let me say, you deserve credit for all of that. We don't object to that. That's to your credit. We support all of that. But I would submit that these now are popular in the city. Our position on the Gaza war and on the election of Donald Trump has created divisiveness and some unpopularity. And that, I would submit, is the reason that you canceled our meeting tomorrow. There is no reason, it was totally fictitious, your reasons for canceling this meeting. You should be ashamed of yourself. Really, you really should. Now, I think what you need to do is to give us a formal apology for canceling that meeting. I think what you need to do is pay us for the extra expense that we've had to bear to get another venue. And I think what you have to do, beyond anything, is to reaffirm what you said after the Gaza event. You came up with an official policy, an official statement, saying that you recognize the First Amendment rights, and you need to do that now. That's the most important thing. Thank you.
I'm going to remind everyone, just to give everyone in the room an opportunity to try and keep your comments to 2 minutes, please.
Oh, now I get the 2 minutes. I'll try to be as quick as I can.
Thank you.
My name is Lori Lisi. I live at 8775 Lincoln. I was here last week. I might have been part of the start of this issue. I'm here tonight to speak about the moratorium and more broadly about room rental policies, especially with respect to political groups and political speech. I'm here as a resident, but I'm also a member of the Democrats of South Oakland County. We have numerous times rented rooms in the library, but we have been told by the rec center that they don't rent to political groups. And I have all of the policies printed out. If you want to know what they are, I know them probably better than anybody at this point. So it doesn't say in the rec center policy that you can't rent to political groups. So anyway, I came last month and asked you guys, I actually spoke in favor of revisiting the room rental policies because they are kind of all over the board. But I wanted them to be made consistent and to actually broaden the availability of all facilities to political groups, to community groups, because we were being told we couldn't rent the rec center, and we have had issues with being over capacity or close to over capacity, so we were looking for those bigger rooms. When I spoke last month, I was followed by a resident who advocated banning all political groups from renting in any city offices. I think not talking in public spaces about our differences does not make them go away. They are still there, bubbling below the surface. I think right now being in community is more important than ever. Whether you believe, as I do, that we are seeing the biggest crisis in our government since the Civil War, or you believe that the current administration is wonderful, I think we can all agree there are deep divisions in our country and to some extent in our local communities in Huntington Woods. And I think the best way to work to repair those divides is to be able to meet in local community spaces and to talk there. I think having discussions within our community is what builds strong democratic muscles. I think it starts locally. I do want to say that we are the chartered Democratic Club for 4 cities, besides Huntington Woods, that's Berkeley, Oak Park, and Royal Oak Township, and none of them have policies against political groups meeting in their spaces. That's never been an issue. I know that was also, when I was here last month, people were suggesting that by renting spaces, and I should say we always pay. We don't ever come in for free. Renting spaces implies that you guys are supporting the policies or the views of the groups, and I think that's specious. I don't think anybody assumes you support or, advocate the policies that the groups who are in your rooms are espousing. And in fact, the library policy, if you read it, says that the group can do nothing to indicate that the library is supporting the policies of the group that is there. So in the future policy, you guys, I suggest you write that in, that, whoever you rent to, you're not necessarily espousing their beliefs. I do know that it's stressful to have this kind of controversy, both for you guys and for the staff. I know especially the library staff has been under some stress. And I'm sympathetic to that, but I don't think that's a reason to, I'm not suggesting you're going to do this, but to in the end deny political groups access to the rooms in Huntington Woods. I really believe it is only through conversations between people who do not agree that we can ever hope to create respect and tolerance. Now to the moratorium. I don't think you have to do it. I think some of you asked really good questions. I think you can just bump along for another 60 days. When I found out that there's an exception that can go to Chris, if somebody says I can't get another room, to me that's as much work as maybe having to consider a group and try to balance all your policies for 60 days. So I don't see a reason. And for people like me who believe we're in crisis right now, to ask us to wait 2 months to have a meeting here may seem too late to some of us. So I would ask you please not to put the moratorium in place. I think that's it. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mark Shostak. We've lived in Huntington Woods since 1991. We raised our 4 kids, and we're excited to know that we have a new granddaughter that we're raising in Huntington Woods. Our daughter is in Huntington Woods as well. I think this woman just spoke. What's your first name again?
Lori.
Lori. I think Lori just gave a great example why the moratorium is necessary. She talks about how the library has one policy, the rec center has one policy, that things seem to be a little bit all over the board. And I think what the moratorium is going to allow the city to do is kind of push the pause button, okay, and reassess everything that's going on in the various public spaces here and put some systems and processes and a uniform system and process so things are consistent, whether it's the library, the rec center, or Burger Park. So I and my family supports a moratorium. I think it's a very judicious thing for the city of Huntington Woods to do, to think this thing through and put something together that we all can live with. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Steve Gold. I live at 26764 York in Huntington Woods. It's very difficult to speak after such eloquent speakers. They have said many of the things that I was going to say, not quite so well, so I'm going to dispose of 2 of my 3 pages of remarks and give you only the last, which is slightly less repetitive. Speakers, the gentleman who just spoke and other speakers at recent commission meetings believe that divisive political meetings and discussions should be prohibited. And the primary reason given is that they are made to feel unsafe when they are confronted with the strong feelings of others who disagree with them about certain matters. And it's true that many other residents of Huntington Woods do hold strong feelings different than theirs about DEI, the Anti-Racism Committee, or the Israel-Palestine War. And those people who hold different opinions include many or most of us in the peace group. But we are not hostile to the people who disagree with us, much less potentially violent. We're not anti-Semitic. We do not encourage anti-Semitism or anyone who would vandalize the homes of Jews or anyone else, break their windows as windows were broken by Nazis on Kristallnacht, or threaten anybody with switchblade knives or Heil Hitler salutes, other things that have happened to the gentleman who spoke. We are a peace group, and we seek less violence, not more, in every part of our society. Further, we think that peace can only be achieved when people are brought together, not when they are kept apart. We believe, in the words of the First Amendment, that peaceable assembly and freedom of speech are not only desirable but essential. We believe that democracy dies when peaceable assembly and freedom of speech are suppressed or impeded. So we ask you, our elected city commissioners, not to take any steps which would deny or reduce access to city meeting rooms because you are afraid of what might conceivably happen when people do assemble peaceably, as we've done hundreds of times, to discuss serious matters of great importance. That is simply participatory democracy in action. Thank you.
I'm Ronald Aronson, live at 10524 Elgin, and I've lived in Huntington Woods for 46 years. I think that's the record for tonight, anyhow.
Not quite.
No? Okay. I've raised 2 children here and participated in raising 2 grandchildren who live just a few blocks away, as does my daughter and her husband. I love Huntington Woods, as do a lot of people who've expressed this, and one of the things I loved about it is the fact that in moving here, I became part of a community of like-minded souls, committed to peace, social justice, to discussions of values, nonviolence, and activism, and all of this epitomized by the applause that's been usually given to our famous doves on July 4th. In 22 years of our meetings, I've had a special role because being at Wayne State, I was able to bring in many of my expert colleagues to enlighten us on several dozen topics. And among the speakers, we've had Mallory McMorrow was mentioned. We also had the famous Pentagon Papers whistleblower, Daniel Ellsberg, and former U.S. Attorney Barbara McQuaid, who was my son-in-law's boss, discussing her book this fall before about 60 people at the rec center, and several times our own former Congressman Andy Levin. So we are, as a group, not just known in Huntington Woods. Some of our members are not in Huntington Woods, although we are the Huntington Woods Peace Group, but we're widely known throughout Southeast Michigan and widely respected. So what's the problem? Well, aside from the issues raised, which seem to be technical issues that have never been an issue for us, never been an issue about inviting the public to our meetings, never been a problem, never been congestion, never been traffic problems, words that I've heard in the last couple of weeks that have, as other people pointed out, have no meaning to us. What about the other words tossed around already tonight and else at other times, previous meetings you've had? Fear, unsafe, scary, violence. The word terrorism was even used at one of your previous meetings. Anti-Semitism has nothing to do, none of those have anything to do, as you know, with our meetings or our speakers. So what's the problem? Well, if you get past the phony excuses, which I want to stress, I think are phony, with all due respect, what's really happening? Very simply, some people, including people here, don't like the words and phrases and speakers that have been at some of the meetings we've co-sponsored, specifically on the Israel war on Gaza. That's an issue. It's a living political issue in our community and in the country. And there's no point in denying it or lying about it or fudging it or hiding under some other language. We have not taken a position on the war. I'll correct my colleague, Don Greenspan. We don't have a position on that war at all. But we've had speakers who have denounced the war, which we have, speakers in meetings we've co-sponsored. That's it. That's the horrible crime. And I agree with Lori Lisi that issues like that should be in the process of being discussed rather than hiding from them and pulling the covers over our head and disappearing in this is a community, we live here, we love it. We should, among other things, engage with each other on crucial questions. We should find a way to do it that's respectful. We should find a way to do it in which we listen to other people. We should find a way to do it that makes a difference. And we haven't been able to do it. And I think it's up to you to not push things under the rug, but to find a way to do it. What's going on? What's going on here? What's going on here is some people don't like what's been going on at our meetings and they want to shut us up. And that's wrong. It's very simply, it's illegal, it's unconstitutional, and it is wrong. And above all, I want to stress, as you know, it won't work. Thank you.
My name is David Heller. We live at 26515 Dundee, relative newcomers to the city. Rather than talk about policy that people have talked about, I'd rather discuss briefly process. I think we would all agree that the issues that have been discussed tonight are highly contentious, and they are very, very difficult to reconcile. They defy simple solutions and simple compromise. As a result, I would strongly recommend that we support the moratorium that's been proposed. Take time to consider the rules and the laws that you're going to be promulgating. Don't do this rushed. Take time to get feedback from the community and to do a good job of crafting these rules. I think that in the end, the time invested will prove very worthwhile in creating a well-considered policy. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none. I'm going to come back to the commission table. Any other comments or questions from the commission?
Mr. Mayor, all we're being asked really tonight is to just decide on whether or not we're going to enact a moratorium. And
correct.
Regardless of what happens tonight, you're committing within 60 days to get us a policy that's, as Ms. Lisi eloquently put, varies by facility, and this one allows this group and this one doesn't, et cetera. That's within 60 days.
Yes, which means we need a policy in 30 days to start discussing.
Right. And that's doable in your mind.
Yes.
And you could, some folks have talked about other communities and policies they've had. You certainly represent enough communities in this county where you can pull those and.
Oh, yeah, I've written a number of them, so.
Could go through best practices and move that. I know Commissioner Elder made the motion. If you're comfortable leaving it in place, that's fine. If you want to withdraw it, I'll withdraw my support. I'll leave it.
I think either way we have to vote on it, right?
Or we can withdraw it.
Well.
It's up to you. There's a motion on the floor.
Yeah, I know.
You want to make a comment before this discussion goes further? Or it gets withdrawn?
I'm gonna suggest that maybe prudent compromise would be, this is the danger of making policy in public, but, the old don't want to see how sausage is made. What about the prospect of tabling the moratorium, just the moratorium, period, for 30 days to the next meeting, because, you know, when you listen to what the concerns are on both sides, that would demonstrate whether or not, you know, we say we need the moratorium to, you know, so that the city has time to discuss, and so we're just not gonna grant any other permits, and we're gonna just hold off. I'm, you know, the constitutional issues here are all I'm concerned about, and both ways. So I don't know, is that a bad idea, or?
Well, I mean, I think,
Before you, because this is relevant,
Go ahead.
the timing. I would like the input of the Anti-Racism Committee and the Parks and Rec Committee, because they have a voice, that's what we've asked them to do, right? Be an advisory board. I think that's really important. We've got to get this right, because as Ms. Lisi pointed out, and she knows both, she probably knows the policy better than anybody in this room right now between the two buildings. It's not consistent, and we need to get to a content-free policy, and we got to get this right. So I guess my long-winded question is, can you also manage the input of two committees that have expressed strong concerns and interest in this policy in that 60 days?
And the library board.
And the library
board,
yeah,
sorry,
library
yes, so
board.
3 committees.
obviously that would require to be done at a public meeting, so trying to get it on the agenda, Chris, I don't know their meeting schedules off the top of my
I
head.
think you could, it would have to be, I mean, really realistically, it'd have to be handled at one meeting of those boards to get their feedback and get input from them, but
Yeah.
I think you could bring this to all 3 of the boards.
Okay, so we've got
And
to
the 60 days.
fast track it, and, okay, all right. So Commissioner Olson,
Well, I'm gonna make a motion to table the moratorium for 30 days, just to see what happens with where you go and where the whole process goes for 30 days. I realize that nothing may happen, I realize there may be more controversy, there's risks both ways, but I'm a little concerned about de facto moratorium right now. It seems like the only possible compromise to that would be just to table that for 30 days. That's just me. I don't know if anybody else would support that.
So this would be a substitute motion to
Yes.
table consideration of the moratorium for 30 days.
Well articulated, Counselor.
So I would need to withdraw my motion.
Well, if there's support
Need a
for the
second for the
substitute
table.
motion, we would see that first.
So this doesn't mean that the moratorium would start in 30 days, but that we would discuss it,
No,
vote
it
on it
would
again
be-
in 30 days.
Back on the next agenda,
Right,
from my understanding.
correct.
So nothing changes for the next 30
Right.
days. We will discuss it again in the next 30
Correct.
days.
In terms of what the city does.
Or we could just vote on the motion as is, and if it does not pass, then there is no moratorium.
You run if you do it that way, you can't bring it back up at the next meeting, can it still be brought back? Just voted down.
There could be a motion for reconsideration.
That has to be made, that can't be made by someone that voted in the negative.
Right,
though.
right.
So that reconsideration can only be made by a commissioner that voted in favor of the motion. That's the danger of not just tabling it, that it's there 30 days from now to consider.
So what do we need?
We need a second for the table.
So there's-
if we
yeah,
want to
there's-
go that direction.
There's a motion to table, so yeah, I think that would be
I still
the,
need a second for that.
I would second to table.
All right. I need to open that up for the public.
well, that's flowing from the agenda item that we've already been discussing.
So I don't need to?
No, it's,
Okay, any other comments or questions from the commission? All right, all those in favor of tabling for 30 days to the next city commission meeting date?
Tabling the moratorium.
The moratorium, yes, that's the.
Tabling
30
the
days.
discussion of the
Right.
moratorium, or the voting on the moratorium.
Yep. All
Aye.
those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. I don't think I have to address the other motion now that's been tabled.
No.
No. Okay.
Good or bad? All right.
We'll find out. Item number 3, which is why I'm sure everybody is here. It's a matter of considering approval of the resolution to support for a grant made possible through the Michigan Department of Transportation for $250,000 for the pavement and sewer reconstruction on Newport.
So moved.
Second.
Any public comment? Comments or questions from the commission? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Hey folks, I need everybody, I can't hear.
Item number 4 is a matter of considering approval of the document management contract with Toshiba America Business Solutions in the amount of $4,400 for a one-time initial setup and a fixed subscription of $398 per month for 4 users, and to authorize our finance director to sign the agreement.
So moved.
Second?
Any public comment? Comments or questions from the commission? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 5 is a matter of approving the request for proposals for a Huntington Woods Recreation Center cafe operator. Chris, do you want to touch on this before we?
Thank you. I just brought this forward at the request of the commission from the last commission meeting that we had. This is much the same as the RFP proposal that was brought forth last year. I did, at the direction of the commission, I did reach out to the one person we had that responded to the RFP last year, who we ultimately did not come to a contract with. I've not received any feedback from them that they would be interested, but I brought this forward again at the request of the commission. If you want to put this out, we can advertise this RFP. There's a little bit of a tight, there's a 3-week window to reply in order to be able to get this back to the commission before the next meeting for their review. I don't know that we'll have more interest than we did, but we can put this out there. I have directed Parks and Rec staff, and particularly Sarah Feingood, who's going to be running the pool this year, to continue with. They are putting together a proposal. They would most likely formally respond to this RFP as one of the respondents, and be able to make a presentation to the commission as to what the city's plans are if we do in fact operate the cafe this year as we did last year. I think they have some pretty, as you might remember last year, we kind of had to put things together at the last minute, so they're coming up with a more robust plan than we had last year with greater offerings. And Sarah's done quite a good job with that. So the RFP's here. If commission agrees, we can put this out and see what responses we get. There was some comment that was made to me today about the insurance requirements that we had here of $500,000 for commercial general liability and $250,000 for motor vehicle liability. I believe the request had been last year to increase those to $1 million and $500,000 respectively, which I think is reasonable. I think those are generally carried by anybody who would operate such a,
Sure.
and the city certainly would have those policies in place for their own operation. So if the commission's agreeable, we will issue this RFP and see what responses we get back, but I would like to try to come up with some resolution of this at the next meeting so we can move forward with plans for operating the pool.
There are a couple of differences in this RFP compared to last year too, that we should point out. One being that we're asking for a flat fee to be paid rather than a percentage of sales or profit or whatever. And we are also leaving open the hours of operation to whoever puts in a proposal, with a note that we would prefer them to be open all the hours that the pool's open, but we're leaving that open to see what they come up with.
Thank you. You are correct. I didn't put those in there as well. I forgot to mention that, but those are changes from the last year's RFP.
So do we we have a
Mr.
motion?
Mayor, I just want to clarify with the city manager too, this requires them to provide service all days that the pool's open, not just the most advantageous days?
It does not require that. It says we would prefer that, but that is, they're not gonna, if they're proposing to be open hours other than that they need to report that back to us, what they would, so we can consider their proposal.
Then I don't see why we just don't run it ourselves, frankly.
Well, that could end up happening.
I think it's going to happen. I think this is exercise in fertility, to be honest with you.
Well, it may
I
be,
mean-
but the,
Yeah, trying to get someone to give us a bid, Garen, with them having to operate all the hours gets, is nobody that's interested, so. We're trying to see what our options are.
So we take the financial hit and allow an outside corporation to profit off the most profitable days, and we eat the loss on the days they don't want to? I'm not for that.
We don't have to accept that proposal.
Yeah, no, I'm
That's
not, I'm
their
not,
proposal.
I'm not in favor of that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor? It's unclear to me if the vendor would be required to staff it on weekends and holidays, which would be the busiest times, because it's left open that they would provide their own schedule. It doesn't appear that there is a minimum in which that the vendor would have to operate the cafe. Is that a
The way
correct
I read it
understanding?
is that we're asking them to tell us what their schedule of hours will be. Am I
Yes.
reading that correctly?
Correct. In last year's
don't
RFP,
have
we
to.
had it specifically stated that they were to be open, all hours the pool was open. This was left more open-ended in an effort to try to generate a response.
well, that's because some days, are, if it's inclement and so forth, or maybe semi-inclement, somebody may decide there's not enough people, whatever. But still, last year, we did have, there was an RFP, there was an acceptance of it, and then the company, the vendor decided it didn't work out. It all fell apart, but, there were residents that did strongly, come out in support of having somebody that's in the business of doing that run it. And so the flip side to, us doing it and so forth is that somebody that's in the business of selling, and selling prepared foods and coffee and so forth, do it. I'm in favor of I see nothing to lose with the RFP, but it isn't gonna cost us anything to do it. It isn't gonna make it, if we don't like it, we don't have to do it, so I'm all in favor of the RFP.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I have a question for the city manager. In this RFP, do you provide the potential candidates with information on pool attendance? How many customers are anticipated, the pool hours? Is that figured into the information that you provide people?
We do indicate what the days that the pool will be open and the hours the pool will be open.
I think it would be helpful to include that, so it might,
Okay.
attract more.
We have data on that.
applicants.
We could put that in there.
And my other question is twofold. What, other than posting it on the city website or the Mitten or whatever, RFP systems that you traditionally use, are you working with small business associations or like the Oakland County Small Business Center to help get the word out to, the businesses in the area to try to attract more applicants?
We did provide this to the Oakland County Small Business Group last time along with Midden. And we did have some inquiries about it. We just didn't actually get formal responses to it.
Okay, I wonder if providing more of the data and information and opportunity might help you attract.
I could include the data that we have about attendance and hours of operation. I can include that in there.
My last question, if you don't find a candidate, do you have a backup plan?
The backup plan will be us operating it, yes. And we've not stopped, we're operating under the assumption that will be the case because we need to have that backup plan in place. If we don't need that, we don't need the staffing, we don't need the operation, then somebody else comes in and operate it, fine, we'll be prepared for that as well.
Yeah.
But I've advised the staff to move forward as if we would end up having to operate this.
Okay, no further questions, thank you.
I'll make a motion.
I'd like to move that we allow the RFP for the operation of the pool snack operation to go forward. as proposed, with the
additional data.
additional suggestions of Commissioner Alvarez.
I will second that then, Mr. Holtzman.
Well-
Thank you.
Any public comment? More comments or questions from the commission? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, motion
Say it
carries.
louder, Commissioner Lozo.
We'll be back running it next year, mark my
That's
word.
You look good with an apron.
If it's a fundraiser for the community groups, you know I'm all in.
Board and commission appointments. Would anyone care to make a motion to appoint Garo Donnell and Dennis Kays to the Environmental Sustainability Board?
I will move to place Dennis Kays and Gerald Danahan onto the Environmental Sustainability Board.
Second.
Any public comment? Comments or questions from the commission? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. City managers report.
If I could read from the room rental and reservation policy. The recreation center may not be rented, this is the current policy that we have that we're looking to revise. The recreation center may not be rented by any resident for a function where the general public is invited to attend. All private functions must be by personal invitation to the event. The application that was submitted that was denied was exactly that. That's why it was denied. The accusations that after taking a lot of heat, that city administration decided somehow to crack down on this particular event of the Peace Group is unwarranted. They were denied based on content. Those comments are unfortunate. I think this is generally a welcoming community. In my 3 years, it hasn't always applied to the people that work here. But I'll let the other people's comments stand on their own. And I'll stand on what I did, and I'm not ashamed of it. And I thank the commission for their consideration, and look forward to revising the policy to be fair toward everybody. We've had some snow, you might have noticed, thanks to the public works crews who got out, particularly that Wednesday snowmageddon that didn't happen, but they were in at 2 o'clock and really had the roads cleared by 7. The sidewalks are being cleared currently as we speak. We have two machines that accomplish that. We're down to one. We just got a part in today, I think, to fix the other one, but we are still clearing sidewalks. I think they are largely cleared, and we'll continue to work on that. We have had some water main breaks in the past. I mean, this is not unusual. This happens this time of year. The community have been patient with us, and we appreciate that. We had one today on Hart. We had to bring in a Vector from outside of the community because we can't dig the ground in these conditions because it's not diggable. But we were able to get that repaired, and we thank everybody for their patience on that. But this is a takeoff on the cold weather, and it does occur. There was we've had a Parks and Rec master plan RFP that has been put out. We did receive 6 bids on that. There was a subcommittee put together. Mr. Steinhardt, myself, Mr. Hahn, and Tracy from Parks and Rec did review those. We did come up with a list of recommendations by all of us, and we were all very, very close on what our recommendations were. So we want to review that with the Parks and Rec Board at their upcoming meeting next week. Get a formal recommendation to come back before the commission to move forward with that plan. There was a timeline we originally set forward in the RFP, and then due to some absences by city administration staff, we are a little bit behind that plan, so we will get a revised schedule where that comes before the city for consideration, because that plan that was submitted in the kind of time frame plan that was submitted in the RFP is a bit behind. Verigy, we've had a lot of work going on with Verigy the last few months. We've put together a cost-effective proposal that will return a lot of money to the city and greatly cut down on our energy use. And will include significant offsets of our current energy use via the use of potential solar panels. So we're looking forward to get that finally. Based on the financial figures we saw, we did make some modifications to that in Verigy to get us back our revisions. So I'm hoping to come forward with a recommendation very soon. And I know this has been ongoing, and I know you want to go through all those presentations again. I think we're very close to just having a final presentation to really talk about the numbers, what we can save, and the scope of the project, and come to a decision on that. So I look forward to have that coming forward pretty soon. Not to continue to be the bearer of bad news, but we have been working on, as part of the budget, which I know we'll get to later. We received word through SACRA meeting last week that GLWA has put forth, and I don't think it's final yet, but this is at least the staff initial proposal for GLWA, the Great Lakes Water Authority. That's where that's where SACWA buys its water from. So they're the wholesale provider of water to us. Are proposing increases of slightly north of 7% for this year. So that'll be a hard thing for SACWA and therefore for us to absorb. That's not final yet, but that's the preliminary number they gave us. If you're thinking, wasn't there an agreement that they were only going to pass along 4% increases for so long a period of time? You're correct. That was for a period of 10 years, and believe it or not, 10 years has passed, which that seems remarkable that it's been 10 years since GLWA was formed, but that's true. So SACWA has not adopted a final rate yet. They will be doing that soon. We'll incorporate that into our budget recommendations, but wanted to tell you sooner rather than later, that's the wholesale cost that's being passed along to us. We'll have to absorb it in our rates as best we can. And I know I don't talk about college football as much as my predecessor, but if I could be indulged for 1 minute, I wanted to give a quick congratulations to a young man who I've had the privilege to get to know a little bit over the last year from Grosse Pointe South High School. Andrew Pazikowski Jr. Signed a letter of intent to play for Wayne State and coach Tyrone Headley next year. 6'4", 225-pound defensive end, and yes, he gets that from his mother's side of the family.
You would think?
And Wayne State's very fortunate to have him, and they just looking forward to be able to hopefully get his name across the back of his jersey. But he's a very good kid, and he's a legit 6'4", 225 with room to grow. Quite an impressive young man in the classroom and on the field, and it's Wayne State's good pickup. So congratulations to young Mr. Pazikowski Jr. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the commission for the city manager?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I've been really impressed. It seems like there's been an uptick in social media communication around city services lately, which has been really nice to see. So knowing that our street sweepers maybe have been out of commission, or the sidewalk sweepers have been out of commission, just encourage notification to the community about why some of that might be delayed, as there are accusations that float around on social media about poor city services.
You don't say.
Yeah, so I just think it's been nice to see more communication. Would love to, have also seen some of that so that residents know what to anticipate as far as the sidewalks.
Yes, Ally Sutton has done a good job with those communications. I will pass that along. Thank you.
Commissioner comments? Mayor Protem?
Very brief. I'd like to thank all the members of the community that came out tonight. These are very difficult conversations to have. But I do want to reinforce something that our city manager said. With respect to all of these discussions about prior events that have occurred in the city, no one has been more staunch on avoiding content discussion than Chris Wilson. Whatever the topic was, he was repeatedly reinforcing, we will not get into discussions about content, period. So just with respect to his comments, that this should not be taken as a direct criticism of him, because he has been staunch in his defense with respect to the content. What people are going to talk about, that is none of our business. That is not the topic of this discussion. I appreciate what everybody had to say here. I'm interested, as is Matt, in the constitutionality of what's going on, and there's always a balance when it comes to constitutionality. Mr. Greenspan would agree with everybody here understands there's balance, and that's all we're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Rozelle?
I also want to thank everybody for coming out, and this is representative government, and I take my seat here very seriously, and so I hear you, and I'm confident that we'll come back with a proposal that's going to work for everybody. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Elder?
Thank you all for coming and expressing your opinions, and some of you who I've talked to one-on-one over the last year or so. Again, just I reiterate, we are all a part of this community. We are a voluntary board, and you put in your time and care into this community in different ways, so we're in this together. And absolutely, we all have different opinions, lived experiences, and views, but I think this community has a shared vision as neighbors and friends. So thank you for being here. I also want to say to the staff at the library and Parks and Rec and Chris Wilson to thank them for the above and beyond efforts that they've done in the last year or so to support many events and meetings in this community. They're civil servants. They're humans. They're trying to do their best as well. So just wanted to thank the team here.
Mr. Steinhardt.
Just second what everybody else has said. Nothing else to add. Concur with my colleagues.
Okay, yes, thanks everyone for coming. It's much more entertaining to have a crowd here. So, we enjoy that, believe it or not. Matt, good luck with your project on our proposal. We're looking forward to seeing that next month. And with that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Motion carried.
Yeah, we met years ago over Alex. You were president of the University Association.
I didn't really.